Welcome to Thread Hub. Let's get started with today's story. After 18 years, my wife said, "I'm done with this marriage." I just smiled. The night Claire decided our marriage was over, she chose to do it in the backyard. I got home from work a little after 7. The patio lights were glowing, and an open bottle of wine was waiting on the outdoor table. Claire sat alone, looking past the fence into the dark. That was enough to tell me trouble had already pulled into the driveway. Claire never sat outside by herself. Not unless she was waiting for someone or rehearsing something unpleasant. I loosened my tie and took the chair opposite her. "What's going on?" I asked. She drew in a slow breath. "We need to talk." I nearly laughed. When somebody opens with those 4 words, the discussion is usually over before it begins. They are not asking for your opinion. They are delivering the verdict. I poured myself a glass of water. "Go ahead." Claire looked nervous. Not heartbroken. Not emotional. Just nervous. Like an employee about to give a presentation she had practiced 20 times and still expected to screw up. Then she said, "I'm finished with this marriage." The sentence stayed between us. Claire studied my face, waiting for the show to begin. Anger. Shock. Maybe some dramatic speech about 18 years and broken promises. Instead, I smiled. Not some huge, lunatic grin. Just a small one. Claire blinked. "What?" I leaned back in the chair. "Nothing." "What do you mean, nothing?" I lifted one shoulder. "I mean, if that's what you want, then that's what you want." Her eyes tightened. "That's it? What exactly were you expecting?" Claire stared at me. For the first time that evening, she seemed honestly confused. "We've been married for 18 years, Grant." "I know. And you're not even going to fight for us?" I looked straight at her. "No." That answer landed harder than I thought it would. Her shoulders went rigid. "Wow. What? You really don't care?" I almost corrected her. Almost. But there was no point. People rarely hear what you actually say when they have already written your part in the scene. Claire stood and crossed her arms. "I thought you'd at least ask me why." "I don't need to." Silence. The wind moved through the trees behind the fence. Claire was the first one to look away. "Fine," she said. "Maybe this is for the best. Maybe it is." She shook her head and went back inside. I stayed in the yard for another minute. Then I finished my water and looked up at the night sky. Claire believed she had caught me completely off guard. The truth was, she was about 6 months behind schedule. By the time she announced the end of our marriage, I already knew the reason. More important, I had already prepared for whatever came after. I did not uncover Claire's affair because I went digging through drawers or stalking her like some discount private investigator. I found out because she became careless. For most of our marriage, Claire had been painfully predictable. She liked routines. The same coffee place. The same workout schedule. The same stores. The same little habits, repeated so often you could set a clock by them. Then the pattern shifted. At first, the changes were small. A dinner that somehow ran 2 hours late. A Saturday business meeting that mysteriously swallowed 6 hours. A sudden need to dress like she was attending a magazine shoot for errands that usually took 15 minutes and involved buying toothpaste. A lot of husbands might have ignored it. I did not. I owned a commercial construction company. My job was to notice problems before they turned into expensive disasters. Patterns mattered. Details mattered. And Claire's details had stopped adding up. One afternoon, while reviewing our monthly spending, I noticed repeated charges connected to a luxury apartment building on the other side of town. They were not rent payments. They were guest parking fees. The same building. Again and again. A few weeks later, another charge appeared from a rooftop bar downtown. Claire had told me she was going to a women's networking event that evening. There was only one problem. The event did not exist. I checked. That was when I started watching more closely. Not emotionally. Strategically. The name Evan Cross appeared about a month later. One morning, Claire left her tablet open before heading to work. A notification flashed across the screen. One sentence. Last night was worth the wait. No heart emoji. No photograph. No dramatic confession written in neon lights. I did not need any of that. I already had enough. Evan was 32. Single. He worked in commercial real estate. Apparently, he also believed sleeping with another man's wife made him impressive. Some men buy sports cars. Others borrow trouble and call it confidence. I confronted neither of them. What would have been the point? Claire was not confused. She had not lost her way. She was making deliberate choices. So I started making mine. I met with my attorney. Quietly. I went through every financial account we had. I moved the assets that legally belonged only to me. I strengthened the protections around my business. I prepared for every possible direction the divorce could take. Meanwhile, Claire behaved as though she were directing the entire production. Every time she walked out of the house, she believed she was one move ahead of me. She was not. One evening, she came into the kitchen smiling at something on her phone. I sat at the counter reviewing contracts. The second she noticed me, she slipped the phone into her purse. "Busy?" she asked. "Always." She nodded. Then she gave me that smile. The same smile she had been wearing for months. The smile of someone guarding a secret and feeling unusually clever about it. I looked right back at her. The difference between us was simple. Claire thought I had no idea what was happening. What she failed to understand was that I had already begun building a life that did not include her. And I had started long before she ever sat across from me in the backyard and announced she was done with the marriage. 3 weeks after Claire delivered her little backyard performance, she began constructing her preferred version of events. I learned about it through one of her friends. Not because I called around asking questions. Her friend called me. Her name was Rachel Bennett. Rachel and Claire had been close for years, but Rachel possessed one trait Claire never properly valued. She had very little patience for nonsense. The call came on a Friday afternoon while I was inspecting one of our project sites. "Grant," Rachel said, "do you have a minute?" "Sure." She paused. "I just had lunch with Claire." I leaned against a steel beam and waited. And Rachel let out a long breath. "She's telling people you emotionally left the marriage years ago." I almost laughed. "Is that what she's saying?" According to Claire, she tried everything. Counseling. Communication. Making an effort. I shook my head. Interesting. Claire and I had never attended a single counseling session. Not one. Rachel continued. "She's treating your reaction like proof that she was right." "What reaction?" "The fact that you didn't fight for her." I smiled. People always misunderstood that part. Refusing to fight was not weakness. Sometimes walking away calmly was the strongest move a person had left. "What did you say to her?" I asked. "The truth." That caught my attention. "And what exactly was that?" Rachel answered without hesitation. "I told her no man leaves that calmly unless he has already seen something." For the first time during the call, I laughed. Rachel understood Claire better than Claire realized. When the conversation ended, I returned to work. I had more important things to handle than whatever story Claire was spreading over lunch. The next week, I signed a lease for an apartment downtown. It was not luxurious. Nothing flashy. Just clean, practical, quiet, and close to my office. The following day, I hired a moving company. I did not deliver a speech. I did not threaten Claire. I did not ask for her approval. I simply began taking my belongings out of the house. The first boxes came from my home office. Then my clothes. Then my personal files and documents. Naturally, Claire noticed. One evening, she stood in the doorway while I packed another box. "What are you doing?" "Moving." She frowned. "Already?" I pulled a strip of tape across the top of the box. "You said the marriage was over. That doesn't mean you need to do everything so quickly." I looked at her. For a second, she seemed startled by what she saw on my face. There was no anger. No grief. Only certainty. "Claire," I said, "the only person who rushed anything is the one who began this 6 months ago." Her expression tightened immediately. I picked up the box and walked past her. For the first time since our backyard conversation, Claire had no reply waiting. The move took 9 days. Not because I owned some ridiculous mountain of possessions. I took my time because I wanted it handled correctly. Every box had a destination. Every document had its proper place. Every decision had been made long before I carried the first box through the door. Claire kept waiting for a confrontation. She never got one. By the last day, the house barely looked different. The furniture remained. The decorations remained. The kitchen looked exactly the same. I took only the things that were mine. Claire was not home the morning I left. She had gone out early. I placed the final box in my truck and walked through the house one last time. Then I left my key on the kitchen counter. No letter. No theatrical farewell. No grand final speech worthy of a bad divorce movie. Just the key. I closed the front door behind me, walked to my truck, and drove away. My apartment felt different the instant I stepped inside. Not because it was larger. It was not. Not because it was newer. It was not that either. It felt different because everything inside belonged to me. For the first time in years, the air felt calm. No tension. No little guessing games. No wondering who Claire was messaging whenever she smiled at her phone. There was only peace. 3 days later, she called. I answered. "Hey," she said. "What's up?" She paused. "I can't find the home insurance documents." I already knew where they were. Top drawer of the desk in the office. Claire knew that too. She had organized the drawer herself. They're in the office desk. Oh. Silence. Then more silence. Finally, I spoke. "Was that everything?" "Yeah." "Okay." I ended the call. A week later, she called again. This time, she wanted the phone number for the lawn service. After that, it was the garage code. Then the warranty information for one of the appliances. The excuses became thinner with every call. The conversations somehow became longer. One evening, she called while I was eating dinner. "I'd been thinking," she said. "Dangerous hobby." Claire ignored the comment. "Don't you think all of this happened a little fast?" I nearly laughed. Fast? She had been sleeping with another man for months. "No," I said. "I don't." Grant, 18 years is a long time. It is. So that's really it? I put my fork down. "What are you actually looking for, Claire?" Silence filled the other end of the line for several seconds. At last, she answered. "I don't know." It was the most honest sentence she had spoken in months. I leaned back in my chair. "I think you do." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you expected me to chase after you." She said nothing. There was not much to say. We both knew I was right. Claire was not calling because she suddenly missed me. She was calling because the version of the breakup she had imagined was not happening. I was supposed to argue, beg, demand another chance. Instead, I had packed my things and left her standing in the middle of her own decision. And that was beginning to bother her. About a month after I moved into the apartment, I received a call that actually mattered. It came from my son, Ethan. Ethan was from my first marriage, long before Claire entered my life. He was 28 and lived 3 states away. He worked in cybersecurity and had inherited my unfortunate habit of noticing details everyone else seemed happy to miss. We spoke regularly, though not every week. So when his name appeared on my phone in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, I answered immediately. "Everything okay?" "That depends," Ethan said. "You tell me." I smiled. "That sounds ominous." I spoke to Claire. There it was. I leaned back in my office chair. "And what did she tell you?" "That the marriage ended. That you refused to fight for it. That you moved out like you had been counting the minutes until you could leave." I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh. "Did you believe her?" "No." His answer came so quickly that my smile widened. "Why not?" "Because I've known you my entire life." "Fair enough." Ethan continued. "You're not impulsive. You don't make major decisions in the heat of the moment. If you walked away that calmly, you had a reason." Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he asked the obvious question. "What really happened?" So I told him. Not every detail. He did not need the full director's cut. Just enough. Claire. Evan. The lies. The affair. The divorce conversation. The planning I had done before she ever announced that our marriage was over. Everything that mattered. When I finished, Ethan stayed quiet. Finally, he spoke. "So you knew before she asked for the divorce?" "Months before." "And you never confronted her?" "No." "Why?" I turned toward the window in my office. Because I had no interest in arguing with someone who had already made her decisions. Ethan went silent again. Then he laughed. "Dad, that's cold. It's practical." "No," he said. "It's disciplined." A week later, Ethan appeared at my apartment carrying 2 suitcases and his laptop. "I'm taking some vacation time," he announced as he walked through the door. "You planning to ask before moving in?" "Nope." I shook my head. "Fair enough." The next several weeks were better than I expected. We worked during the day, picked up dinner at night, and talked about business, money, investments, life, and whatever plans came next. For the first time in a long time, I was not staring backward at what I had lost. I was paying attention to what remained in front of me. And the strangest part was that my life became stronger after the marriage ended. Not weaker. Claire had probably imagined that leaving me would turn me into some lonely man eating canned soup in the dark while staring at old wedding photographs. Instead, the divorce removed the noise. It removed the suspicion. It removed the constant distraction of living beside someone who thought secrecy was a personality trait. The more stable my life became, the more often Claire called. It was almost as though she could feel that something had changed. She was right. Something had. The man she expected to find sitting alone and waiting for her no longer existed. She was about to discover that in person. Claire showed up at my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening. Ethan and I had just finished dinner. We were sitting in the living room, going over a business proposal he had brought with him, when the concierge called upstairs. "Mr. Mercer, there's a woman in the lobby asking to see you." I already knew who it was. "Send her up." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Claire?" "Probably." "Want me to vanish?" I shook my head. "No." 5 minutes later, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, Claire looked different. Not awful. Just exhausted. The confidence she had carried around for the past several months had disappeared. Whatever had replaced it did not fit nearly as well. "Grant," she said. "Come in." She stepped inside and immediately noticed Ethan sitting on the couch. The surprise on her face was impossible to hide. "Oh. I didn't realize you had company." Ethan stood and held out his hand. "Good to see you, Claire." She shook it awkwardly before looking back at me. "I was hoping we could speak privately." "You can speak here." Her eyes narrowed. "Seriously?" "Seriously." Claire clearly disliked the answer, but she sat down anyway. For several seconds, no one said a word. Then she broke the silence. "You seem happy." I nearly laughed. Of all the opening lines available to her, that was not the one I expected. "I am." Claire looked around the apartment. The orderly shelves. The workstation. The clean rooms. The calm atmosphere. Everything had a place, including me. "I didn't think this was what I'd find," she said. "What did you expect?" She hesitated. "I don't know." I nodded. That answer was becoming something of a personal slogan for her. Then she looked straight at me. "When did you know?" There it was. The real reason for the visit. I leaned back. "Know what?" "About Evan." Ethan quietly closed his laptop. Apparently, no one was leaving the room now. I kept my eyes on Claire. "About 6 months before you asked for the divorce." The color left her face. "You knew for that long?" "Yes." "And you never said anything?" "No." Claire stared at me as though I had suddenly started speaking another language. "I don't understand." "What part is confusing?" "You behaved normally." "No," I said evenly. "I behaved like someone who was prepared." The words struck harder than I intended. Claire looked down at her hands. Then she raised her eyes again. "He's gone." I was not surprised. Evan had always looked temporary. Some men have the emotional durability of a paper umbrella. Fine until the weather turns. "What happened?" I asked. Claire gave a bitter laugh. "He didn't want a relationship." Neither Ethan nor I responded. Claire shook her head. "I thought he cared about me." I looked at her without blinking. "No. You thought he wanted to give you what I was already giving you." The room became completely silent. For the first time since entering the apartment, Claire had no answer. She sat there quietly for several seconds. The old Claire would have rushed to fill the silence. She would have explained everything. Defended herself. Rearranged the facts until someone else looked responsible. This Claire simply looked tired. Finally, she spoke. "I made a mistake." Ethan glanced at me but remained silent. Claire continued. "A huge mistake." I gave a single nod. She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "That's all you're going to say? What would you like me to say?" "I don't know." There it is again. Claire lowered her eyes. I was not trying to punish her. I was simply telling the truth. For months, Claire had made one decision after another without slowing down long enough to question any of them. Now that those decisions had finally produced consequences, she suddenly seemed unsure about everything. She drew in a deep breath. Evan wasn't who I thought he was. I know. He said everything I wanted to hear. I know. He made me feel important. I watched her calmly. And then? Her jaw tightened. Then he left. Neither Ethan nor I reacted. Claire shook her head. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "I understand perfectly." That made her look at me. I leaned forward slightly. "You confused excitement with happiness." Claire turned her eyes away. You confused attention with love. She said nothing. You convinced yourself that risking everything would somehow make your life better. Tears gathered in her eyes. For the first time that evening, she did not argue. She did not try to twist the meaning of my words. She knew they were true. Eventually, she looked back at me. Can we start over? The question settled over the room. Ethan remained completely still. Claire kept her eyes fixed on mine. She was serious. Not testing me. Not fishing for reassurance. Completely serious. For months, she had expected me to fight for the marriage. Now she was the one fighting to save it. The irony was hard to miss. No. The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No dramatic pause to make the moment look more important. Just the truth. Claire looked as if I had slapped her. Grant. No. You didn't even think about it. I already did. Months earlier. When I discovered the affair. When I listened to her lie. When I watched her choose another man while coming home and pretending nothing had changed. That was when I made my decision. Not tonight. Not when she appeared at my door. Months ago. Claire wiped the tears from her cheeks. People make mistakes. Yes. People deserve second chances. Sometimes. She stared at me. But not me? I shook my head. Trust isn't a light switch, Claire. The room went silent. You didn't destroy this marriage in a single day. I stood. And I'm not rebuilding it in a single day either. Claire lowered her head. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed to understand that it was truly finished. Not temporarily. Not because emotions were running high. Not as part of some clever strategy. Completely finished. There was nothing left to discuss, bargain over, or renegotiate. Claire rose slowly. For a moment, she looked as if she wanted to say something else. Maybe she had one final argument prepared. Maybe she hoped there was still one perfect sentence that could change my mind. But she had nothing left. She had already offered every excuse she possessed. None of them changed what she had done. She walked toward the door. I followed her. Not because I intended to stop her. It was simply what you did when someone was leaving your home. At the doorway, Claire turned around. The rain outside had grown heavier. Light from the hallway reflected in her wet eyes. Do you hate me? She asked. The question caught me off guard. I considered it for a moment. Then I shook my head. No. Claire looked confused. Why not? Because hatred requires investment. It takes energy. Emotion. A willingness to keep carrying someone around in your head long after they have stopped belonging there. Somewhere along the way, I had lost all of that. I just don't trust you anymore. Claire swallowed. Somehow, that answer seemed to hurt more than anger would have. Anger might have given her hope. Anger would have meant there was still something alive between us. But there was not. After a few seconds, she nodded. Then she opened the door. Before stepping into the hallway, she stopped one final time. I really thought you would fight for me. I met her eyes. No. For us, then. I shook my head again. You had already made your choice. Claire held my gaze. Then she nodded. This time, she finally understood. Not because I had explained it more clearly. Not because she suddenly agreed with me. Reality had simply caught up with her, and reality tends to arrive like an unpaid bill, late, irritating, and impossible to charm. Without another word, Claire walked away. The elevator doors closed behind her. That was the last time I ever saw her. I remained in the doorway for a moment before closing it. When I returned to the living room, Ethan looked up from the couch. You okay? I smiled. The same small smile Claire had seen months earlier in the backyard. The smile that had confused her. The smile she had mistaken for indifference. Yeah. Ethan nodded. I figured. A few minutes later, he reopened his laptop and returned to work. I sat beside the window and looked out across the city lights. My thoughts drifted back to that night in the backyard. The night Claire sat across from me and said, "I'm finished with this marriage." At the time, she believed my smile meant surrender. She saw it as proof that I did not care. Maybe she even thought she had one. But that was never what the smile meant. The truth was much simpler. By then, I had already accepted what was happening. I had already made my decision. I had already begun moving forward. Claire believed she was taking away my future. Instead, without meaning to, she handed it back to me. Sitting in that apartment, with peace inside my home, my son only a few feet away, and my life moving in the right direction again, I finally understood something. The night Claire said she was done with our marriage was not the night my life fell apart. It was the night my life finally began getting better. Thanks for watching.